Hello, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And great to be back for another episode where we're going to deep dive into the topic of how do I lead effectively across cultures? Now, this topic is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's an area that I have been helping clients, organizations with a lot with recently. I've been helping organizations that have strategic global headquarters who need to influence and align across multiple markets and regions towards a decision point to deliver results. I've also been working with an organization, helping them think about how their leaders can adapt their leadership style as they step into new roles in new regions and are working with very diverse teams where the culture is not set. These kinds of questions, these kinds of contexts are very common. And in fact, I know that many of you listening to this will be in organizations that experience this every day. Either you have had that experience personally, where as a leader, what has worked really well and effectively in one context, usually maybe in your own sort of home culture, perhaps isn't working so well when you move to a new role. And if you are very serious about becoming a global leader, this skill, knowing how to lead effectively across multiple cultures, is going to be a key part of your success factors. So that's why I wanted to come to this today. And we're going to get into the topic of cultural intelligence, which is a very core part of my work. And I've realized I've not spoken about on the podcast for a little while now. But before we do, cultural intelligence, leading effectively across cultures, these are really important topics for you if you are serious about being a global leader. And so I want to let you know that I have a special free resource that goes with this podcast episode, which is also helping you with the other skills that I think are critical in your communication and ways of working when you want to be a global leader. This resource is a series of 5 short and sharp mini videos that will be delivered direct to your inbox, one a day for 5 days, and you can access at any time. If you'd like to get hold of that extra resource, completely free of charge to you as part of this podcast episode, head over to www.culturecuppa.com/leader. Coming back to cultural intelligence, then, the first point that I want to raise with you is that culture is, of course, not just about national culture. It's the place that people tend to go when they think about this topic. But if you want to act effectively as a leader, then you want to think about culture through multiple lenses. That could be about regional culture. It could be about departments, if you're navigating across different functions and departments. It could be about recognizing that being a leader means influencing externally with your customers or clients or partners or investors, and that you need to maybe adapt your leadership style to their cultures. It could also be about individual culture. We all show up in our own individual way, and yet our culture is totally invisible to us. We cannot see it. We are a blend of how we were raised, our heritage, of where we have lived and worked. And in fact, our culture is always ever evolving through the workplace and life experiences that we have. And that is important to recognize. It's not a static concept. But what we do want to recognize is therefore that we do things, we interact, we lead in very different ways from other people. So, how do we do this then? How can we be an effective leader if we have our natural style, but then others maybe have different expectations of us based on what their concept of a leader is? Okay, so let's talk about this. What does success look like? Well, I think it starts with having a global mindset. It's about recognizing that we are all individuals with our own cultures. Yes, you will have your personality. And yes, there is, of course, much talk as a leader about showing up authentically. But the way that you show up authentically, the way that you do things in your own personal way, you may choose to adapt that to the context and the situation. And that's not just about cultural intelligence, that's about being a skillful leader, recognizing that you won't just do things one way. You have the cultural intelligence as well as the emotional intelligence to recognize different contexts, different people require different things of you. So you have to be open to that. And I work with some very large multinational, really quite large, huge kind of global organizations. I won't say the names here, but what I want you to know is even if you work for one of those very large corporate environments which are present across multiple regions around the world, this is still important. There will be cultural differences even within one organization. So it starts with having the right global mindset to be an effective global leader. From there, I want you to move into why does it matter to you? This, in cultural intelligence language, is known as CQ drive. But why does it matter to you to be a global leader? Why does that get you out of bed each day and go to work, whether you've achieved that level or you're on your journey towards it? What motivates, inspires, drives you to do that work? For some of you, that might be about people and experiences. For some of you, that might be about your personal impact and feeling like you're able to bring people together across multiple places. You feel like maybe you're developing people, giving them opportunities to grow and develop as well. Or maybe it's actually more about the status and the pay. Or it could be a combination of all of those factors. But I think it's really important to know for you personally and specifically, why does it matter? If you can identify those factors, part of your CQ drive, then this helps give you the motivation to keep going, even when you're having those more tough and challenging days, which for sure will come up. Because one of the joys and perhaps one of the challenges of being a global leader is that it's not always easy to navigate. You won't always know the answer. And as I mentioned earlier, the way that you usually lead your meetings, your teams, the way that you normally get your results might not always work in the way that you're expecting when you move into that new space. So, having that resilience to keep going, having the confidence to know that you are creative enough to find solutions and you will find a way through. This comes from the place of knowing your motivations and drivers for doing it in the first place. So, know why you want to be a global leader if you're not there already. If you're at that level, really acknowledge it. Why is it you do this job? So, that is the start. Why does it matter? The next question is really about what's different. Now, this is all part of, in cultural intelligence language, CQ knowledge. Starting off with yourself, because we can't recognize those differences if we don't know how we show up. And as I mentioned, your culture is often not very visible to you. It's hard to put into words how you do things and how culture is influencing your behaviors and communication approaches. So, really consider this. Consider knowing yourself and what your preferences are for behaviors. If you have the language to describe that, as I do with my individual and team profiles when I do a facilitator cultural intelligence workshop, then you can really explore then the rest of the team. How do they prefer to do things? What do they expect in conversations around decision making? How do they expect feedback? What if there's a confrontation? How do they expect that to be dealt with and to play out? And what do they expect to happen if there is a problem? These are the kinds of scenarios that most of you, I'm sure, listening to this will be facing, if not daily, then certainly on a very frequent basis. So, being able to work out how you prefer to navigate those situations and then how others like to do it will give you the insights and the knowledge around where the biggest gaps are and where, therefore, some of the roadblocks might come up. That insight is gold. If you can know that, then you can anticipate some of the problems that might happen. You can already start to think about and plan what you might do about that. But if you don't have that knowledge, you'll be experiencing that through the pain of it, through finding out as you go through the situation that something's not working. So that knowledge, knowing yourself, knowing what's different with the way others prefer to do things, your own team, as a global leader, that insight is valuable. So if you don't know your behavioral preferences, then for sure, come and talk to me. You need to know how to talk about this, and also in a language which is neutral, not assigning whether behaviors are good or bad or preferable or less preferable, but more recognizing there are different approaches which are influenced by our cultures. So that is the next area. But it doesn't stop there. And of course, it can't stop there because insight by itself is just knowledge. That's it. As a global leader, it is your responsibility to think about what to plan to do differently, to be strategic about it. And in cultural intelligence framework, this is called CQ strategy. So I know the pace of change, the pace of performance means that you are under pressure to go from probably meeting to meeting, from interaction to interaction, with very little time to think about this. But if you don't, and particularly for those more important, significant meetings, anticipate what might come up, to plan how you want to adapt and adjust your own behaviors for the situation, then you're just walking into challenges you know about. So take the knowledge, take the insight, and apply it. Consider where you want to adapt your behaviors and communication style, and quite frankly, where you don't want to adapt, where it matters to you to hold more authentically true to the way you do things. This is also not about, as somebody once asked me, completely changing your personality and doing the opposite from how you like to do things. Of course, it's not, because that would again not be in line with who you are as a person. It is recognizing, though, where you would be prepared to adapt, where you would plan to see what works, to see if you can achieve a better result in that interaction. So be really clear, make that intentional, active choice. What do you plan to do? And then see how that plays out. What works and reflect what isn't working and might need further change. And that brings us to the next stage, which is do, learn, and refine, because it isn't about, with this area and leading effectively globally, it's not about trying something once, trying out a strategy and getting an instant result that's going to work every time. People are people. Context change, emotions change, the drivers and motivations change as well. So that's where we have to approach this in the framework of cultural intelligence CQ action as a series of experiments. We have to understand that this is really critical part of being successful as a leader and effective when leading global teams. What works initially may not be the right solution. You might have to try out 2 or 3 different approaches to see what connects. I would highly encourage you at this stage to get the feedback, to understand from your team what is landing well with them and perhaps what needs further improvement or change. It's about recognizing that it's an action. So we need to move out of strategy and you need to implement and activate this, which is very important to me because my key driver is about making things practical and applicable. I want to see that things are activated. So you have to consider your approach to those meetings and what you're actually going to do differently. Think about what you're going to adjust in your interaction approach, the way you communicate, how you say things with your tone of voice, your body language, what you might need to do with your expressiveness as well. These are all key elements that you need to think about and consider, and many, many more to really ensure that you are putting this into action. So, we have covered a number of areas today to do with this very big question of how to lead effectively as a global leader of teams. I think this is critical, and I can see that from the work that I do, many organizations value this as well. But even for you as an individual listening to this today, my message to you is that whatever your global context looks like now or in the future, cultural intelligence is a critical skill for you to have. It is one of many core skills that I advocate for you in your communication and ways of working to be successful. That's why I'm offering this free resource to accompany this podcast episode, and I highly recommend that you go download that now. To access it, all you have to do is head over to www.culturecuppa.com/leader, and that will be an extra boost to your learning and growth around these topics today. As we come to the end of this episode, I do want to make sure that you're taking away value from this. So I'm going to ask you some activation questions. The first question I'm going to ask you is, how well do you know yourself and your own cultural influences? Have you got a strong sense of what your behavioral preferences are and what is driving the way that you do things as a leader? If you don't, then make sure you DM me, by the way. I want to be able to help you with that so you can recognize your own behavioral preferences. But the second point is really thinking about your current teams. Whether you're the leader of those teams already or not, it doesn't matter. You can think about your peers as well. But I really want you to consider the cultural factor here. What is it that drives them to do things differently? How are they communicating and interacting with you in a way that suggests that they have different expectations around what success looks like, around what a good leader looks like? These types of questions are really going to help you activate today's episode. So please take the time to do that. And I would love to know your learnings. Feel free to message me over on LinkedIn on my personal profile, Victoria Reynoldson, and I'd love to hear from you. As I always do, I love to hear from my listeners. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this was a very critical topic. I realized we needed to bring this topic into the podcast, so I hope you have found it valuable, and I very much look forward to seeing you next time.